What is going on, you guys? It's your boy, the Madoff marketer here, and we are back with episode 132, I believe, of the video game therapy series. Um, yeah, Madoff marketer. I mean, I feel like, and I'm gonna get on my soapbox early today. I just feel like every advertisement I see now is like everything is pitched as this, you know, because like the pitch behind a Ponzi scheme is it's too good to be true, and things that are pitched as too good to be true often are indeed just that. They are too good to be true, meaning that they're not real, they're fake. Much like a Ponzi scheme, it's like, oh, there's a way of, the returns are just unrealistic. Where I now feel like that is now applied to every single facet. Anything that could be marketed is now it must be the solution to all of your problems, right? Where it's like instead of just let's say like an app that's just maybe just to help your wellness a little bit, get you a little bit healthier if you're 20 pounds overweight, or I don't know, just in some way to fix a manageable problem. We'll say even like a fixable problem even. Now the advertising or the marketing of that has to be something that literally fixes your marriage, your finance, like fixing everything, not even just like one thing, like something, an app that is, a finance app that's just meant to control your subscriptions. The marketing has to like, you have to like, it has to like do eye surgery or something, just like all the marketing now is so dramatized that if you take it for, and I know they're being, I'll say like allegorical or facetious even with some of these marketing campaigns, but if you take them at face value, you literally are supposed to believe that your whole world will change because of the Rocket Money mobile app. I mean, it's frankly ridiculous. Same even with food, right? Even food is like is romantic, and this is even a greater point about people that have this just very like perverted and this very distinct relationship with food of any kind. It's almost like this pathological associations with certain foods. And I mean, it's always like a snack food or something. I mean, maybe the easiest way to see this is like, I don't know, a drunk 20-year-old with Cheez-Its, right? It's like there's something, very carnal about their relationship with Cheez-Its, where it's like this, where it's just like, okay, it's like a snack food, a comfort thing or something like that. But it's seen as like these, like, oh my God, don't fucking touch me and my Cheez-Its, or I'll rip your head off, where it's just like, this seems to be more common now that there's just these strange, like, these foods that you gotta have, right? Like a week without, the nightly Tom and Jerry's or Ben and Jerry's or whatever it's called. I guess Tom and Jerry's would be a decent ice cream, name too, I guess. Whatever. The weekly Ben and Jerry's is like, what keeps him going, right? Psychologically, it's like, I need to have 'em. Even with like, alcohol, it actually makes more sense. Or it's like my nightly glass of wine I gotta have, otherwise, don't talk to me, or the coffee in the morning, instead of just kind of seeing things as what they are, like, all right, the coffee is, and not to be reductionist and that there can't be like, any emotional associations with foods, but not every food needs to have, an emotional association with it, right? You can have foods that you just enjoy, to a moderate amount, and you don't make it into some, deep personal, or psychological, requirement to have your daily cup of coffee or Cheez-Its, after you have a beer or your nightly beer or whatever it is. I think people are now pathologizing too many things, and it just overcomplicates, the entirety of their life, and it can envelop them. Not to say that everyone who enjoys Cheez-Its or is, but it's just too dramatized. There's just too much emphasis put into it. It's bizarre in my opinion. Anyway, um, yeah, something that has been also frustrating me is just like people that like say you're employed at some place, and they just and I understand that things have to have, I'm in favor of a certain amount of protocols, right? It's not like I'm not an anti-protocol guy where nothing can have, there can't be due process for anything. There should be, I'm okay with things having a process and due protocol, but I feel like the rigidity now that people have for their sacred stupid protocols when they're just made up protocols, like a gym membership, for example. They're like, oh, we only do 12-month gym membership. We don't do month to month. It's like, all right, well, really, like, you're turning away anyone that wants a month to month member. You have to have a 12-month membership, like, really? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, all right, well, what about, like, just, can you do me a solid, and can we, like, haggle on, like, no, there's no, absolutely no, discussions whatsoever. There's no ability to be like, well, what if it's not worth that? It's like, all right, I'll give you $20 for these. It's like, well, no, the protocol says it's 20. I don't give a fuck about your thing. Do me a solid here. I don't want, I want a deal on this. It's like, well, no, we can't do any of that because we have the manager. Okay, well then get the fucking manager over here. I want a deal on this. Can we, what happened to, like, any form of there's no negotiation on anything anymore. It's even like, well, you says we give you 3 sauce packets, per order. It's like, all right, well, what if I want 4 different sauces? Just give me, like, well, we can't do that, sir. We have, well, then just fucking break the protocol once in a while to do me a favor. I'm not asking for $10,000. I'm asking for an extra sauce packet. It's like, well, if you do it for you, do it for everybody. It's like, well, no, you don't have to do it for everybody unless everybody's going to come in here and ask for 4 sauce packets, which at that point you might have a systemic problem. I'm just asking to do a favor here. And it's not like, I mean, I understand on one end, like, for giant corporations, that have a whole laundry list of rules. But I even see now, like, mom and pop shops that have to adopt these, like, absurd protocols and, like, rigidity with things where they can't just break protocol once in a while. And I don't know. It's not even about protocol per se. I think, the better way to put this is just there's no, like, solids anymore. I can't, do anybody a favor and expect it in return, just because, and maybe this, speaks to a broader point about, the disruption of community, and, because there's not, like, because you're not certain that I'll, scratch your back, at some point later. I now have to, like, keep tabs on anything, which I've said before. It's like, it bothers me more than anything, of, like, this, like, perpetual little tab keeping, right, on everything. It's like, every little thing, like, somebody once Venmo requested me for a toll booth, and it was like $2 split along 5 people, because it's like, what the fuck are you Venmo requesting me 40 cents for? I mean, this is insane. This is like textbook, don't worry about it, I'll get you later, or, like, it'll in some ways it'll even out. And I know people, like, don't want to get screwed, but the point is that you have good enough friends and people that you trust in that you're not gonna get screwed in the long term. In fact, I think, it'll be a better relationship, a more symbiotic relationship, if you tend to give in excess. You are almost want to be on the losing side of it. So it just bothers me that these aren't friends that won't do favors for me. That's not really what it is. I just think it's like, even smaller businesses just want to negotiate on something. It's like, all right, well, if I get 2, can you cut me a discount? It's like, well, no, sir, it doesn't work like that. Well, it can work like that, actually. You could. There's not, like, there's no law of the universe that says you couldn't cut a deal. Like, I feel like these have been around forever. Like, you buy 2 of something, you should get a little discount. Or, maybe I don't want the whole thing, I just want half the pie. Is it possible? Well, we can't. We couldn't cut the pie. Yeah, you could. You just don't want to, right? You just don't. You want to. You might get more money out of more people by forcing them to buy the entire thing, even if they don't want it. But you could totally cut the pie in half and sell me half the pie. But you just don't want to. It's like, all right, fine. But don't, like, waterboard me through this. Like, well, it's, like, against the law. It's not against the law to sell me half the pie. You just don't want to do it, which is fine. But, like, I feel like nobody ever wants to sell you half a pie anymore. They only have to sell you the whole fucking thing, which, I'm not even eating pie. This isn't about pie, but I think this is, metaphorically is about pie. Nobody will do anything but sell you 40 pies now. So it's like, what if I just want 1 pie? It's like, well, no, sir, we only sell the pies in, sets of a dozen. It's like, well, who the fuck wants a dozen pies? Like, I don't want to spend 40 grand on pies. I would like a half a pie, but now you're not even going to sell me 1 pie. Like, now you have to have these giant orders of things. So it's just obnoxious. I mean, maybe the gym membership is probably the closest example of why I'm frustrated about this. Where it's like, what do you mean you don't do month to month? You really, like, why not just one day? What's, like, the daily pass? Like, well, sir, we only do the $700 minimum 4 week. It's like, okay, really? You can't just have somebody stroll in here in an afternoon and pay for one thing? It has to be this, like, giant commitment. Like, what the fuck's wrong with you people? And it's like, well, sure, this is just how we do. It's like, I understand, but do you have any flexibility or sympathy for extenuating circumstances? What if I'm an out of towner that just wants, maybe a week, or a week and a half? Can we cut a deal and say $100 for the week and a half? It's like, well, no, you don't have to, have one of our packages. Fuck your packages. Are you a small business or not? This isn't Walmart. This is just, some random fucking place. You don't have to deal with these stupid, again, you could just cut the pie in half and sell me half the pie. It's not like I'm gonna, put it on, I'm gonna bring it to court, and everyone has to now be obligated to sell you half the pie. Just do me a favor. It's like I'm not. You never know when it's gonna come around to help you. But now, like, you've made an enemy out of me because you made all this deal about not selling me half the fucking pie when you could have just, again, done me a favor. And odds are every day now someone's not coming in there asking for half the pie. Which again, at that point, it's a systemic issue. It's not like you're not doing favors for everyone all the time. And what's the deal anyway with not ever having the capacity to do anyone a favor ever? You can't ever give somebody a chance or take some slack. Sure, maybe it is. Maybe you lose a little bit of money selling half the pie one time. But if I've had a good experience, it's the whole like long-term customer thing where, the unit economics of something may not always make sense, but do you want, a long-term business? You want happy customers in the long term or not? Sure, you could, if you like penny nickel and dined me and got, an extra 10 cents out of me on one order, all you're gonna do is just piss me off. It's not worth, essentially a possible lifetime customer or the people I could talk to. And I know the businesses now are generally big enough where, one customer's negative experience doesn't really matter. And they don't really value this, like, we want to be around and we want to be loved by the community. They really don't care. But I guess I'm just kind of mourning that loss that, you can't walk into a pie store and buy half a pie anymore. You have to buy, 40 pies or something, or, whatever the equivalent is. I'm sure there are still places that, do this like micro business, but, or just business based off like, we'll haggle a little bit. I think your product or your service is worth this much. You think it's worth that much. Let's meet in the middle somewhere. Let's find some kind of common ground. Not for, maybe not for everybody all the time, but for extenuating circumstances to be able to, make it work for them. It's like, all right, well, fine. This is a little bit of a different situation, so we'll, make it work. But it's like, no, we have to follow the protocol all the time. It's frustrating. Anyway, I'll move on to something else here. Yeah, this is kind of related to that whole diatribe, but just about like this paradox of generosity is the way I put it. In the sense that, I think people that are like, the more that you charge me for something, like the less I'm then like willing. So the way I thought about this, or the way I put this, into my head myself, was like, suppose I have a friend who does like car repairs or something, or they do oil changes or whatever, and he does it out of his garage. I could go to like a regular oil change place, and this doesn't make any sense because I do my own car repair for the most part, unless you know it's an engine replacement, which is something I can't do. But for the most part, I try to do my own little minor fixes. But suppose you don't, and I have a friend that does this, and or you go to a regular shop and they charge you $80, which is just a gross ripoff unless you're just not getting anything worth $80. The oil, whatever, nothing's worth $80. That's ridiculous. And so you're like, oh, we want a tip. It's like, I'm not fucking tipping you. You charge the shit out of me. $80 is ridiculous. Whereas like, your buddy, you just say, hey, don't even worry about it. Like, don't, I'd probably give him 100, just because he's like not going to charge me. Like, but the moment he's like, it'll be $65. Like, what the fuck, dude? Like, you're barely like, what do you mean it's 60? Like, why are you overcharging me? It's like, no, what you should do, the right thing to do, in my opinion, is say, hey, don't worry about it. And then I'm like, you know what? No. I'm going to pay you. I'll give you $100. Here you go. And it's because I'm happy to part with even more money, right? Because you would have got, like, there was no situation in which you charge me $100 and I'm happy about paying. No, it's only in the situation where you say, yeah, don't worry about it. You'll give me back for something, or, maybe you'll help me out with something later. And then it's like, at that point, I go, no, I actually want to pay you now because, you're doing me a favor. This is really nice. And you didn't even want to charge me. That's even better. I want to give you more money now. That's actually the right way to do it. Isn't to like, say, well, to charge the fucking shit out of me and then wonder why I'm, holding on to every last dollar. It's like, I'd be hesitant to part with $60 if you're charging me, 80, whereas if you're like, yeah, don't worry about it. This is just a favor. And then, I'll get you back with something else later. I'd be like, you know what? No, here's a big tip for you, because I feel like that's the right thing to do. And I just think that's just not the way that people, operate now with businesses. It's all like to get as much out of you at that exact time, no matter what. So I don't know. I just call that like the paradox of generosity, where it's like, the more you want to charge me, the less I want to give you. Whereas, ironically, you might get a lot more out of me by not charging me, or charging me much less. Even like if I go to a shop and they're like, oh, it'll be $20. I'm like, really? $20 is That's a really good deal. Here's 40. And sure, I'm not saying everyone all the time will do that, and you can't build a business, expecting that. But actually, you kind of can. Actually, a lot of businesses, like waiters, make a lot of their money mostly off tips. Given that people, you're known to tip a lot, or that's like a part of the culture. So it's not saying you can't like price that into a business. You surely can, but there's also a lot of like psychology that goes into like tipping culture in general. And I'm not actually a fan of like the tip culture. I think the premise of it being like you know, we're giving you a deal and like tip us equivalent to what you think but because we're cutting you a deal, it no longer kind of exists now because even restaurants are gouging you for every penny you have, so it doesn't even feel like a deal, right? Whereas like if my buddy has a shop and he's like, oh, these burgers are $2. I'm like, $2? That's a steal. Here, no, I'll tip you big because that's you're obviously cutting me a deal. But now it's like you go to a place and a burger's $48 and the tip like is included already. It's like I'm not even. Why the fuck would I tip you any extra now? This seems even the regular tip seems ridiculous because I know I'm getting charged out of the ass. It's like I'm not getting a deal here. I know I'm not. So like I don't want a tip. Whereas I if I there's almost no situation now where you really feel like you're getting a good deal. Like what do you get a good deal on anymore? I mean, eggs are like $14. So there's not really any service or anything that it really feels like a steal to me. It's like I either do it myself for next to nothing or whatever the materials cost. I'm like, wow, well, that's a deal because I did it my fucking self. Or you just get completely ripped off by anybody. I said the only exception is if you know somebody that, does you a favor, which at that point is not, but there's no like actual market or any business that really cuts you a deal on anything. It's all, kind of rip off. And maybe like, buying in bulk from like Costco might seem like a deal. But Costco's obviously still making money hand over fist, from their subscription and the fact that they're paying even less for even bulker items, and you're not really might feel like a deal, but I don't really think that's a deal in the same sense of like your buddy doing a favor for you. But either way, I don't know. It's just the whole like death of doing solids and favors and taking chances on people. Because yeah, the odds are you may lose a little bit of money on a transaction, but the hope is that in the long term, if if you believe in this like I don't know this reciprocity, this human reciprocity of doing something nice and getting something nice in return, or even just like this sense of karma, so it'll work out. That's the kind of way I always saw things, with like I don't know, even just buying something from like the gas station for my buddy. It's like, all right, I'll get this, and then you'll get me back with something later. Don't worry about it. I'm not gonna like make sure that I win that side. That's not the point. That's not the point of having, friends is to make sure that you come out transactionally ahead. But now that like unit economics is kind of baked into our psychology, we have to like think that every single transaction, social, financial, anything has to like be a net win. We have to win. It's all about like getting the upper hand, the edge. It's like you're just fucking over your people that are supposed to be your friends. It's not like winning in this side. It's not. You're not making friends by doing this. You're being a cocksucker. So I don't know. I'm just kind of mourning that loss as a society. But yeah, I guess I was also thinking about I don't know. I feel like I have this weird. It's not really this ability per se. I suppose it could be thought of as an ability or like a I don't know a social crotch of some kind. But it's almost like this. And I'm sure many other people have this ability too. But it's like this, almost like this toggleable autism, right? Where it's like it's not like you're autistic all the time or like all of your tendencies 24/7 are autistic. It's like this person's obviously has a problem, but it's like there are contexts and situations on which like you can kind of turn off and like pretend to be normal and no one would think anything of it. Whereas I guess left to your own devices you kind of appear to be this autistic person. And I'm not saying I'm strictly like this all the time. I'm just there's a lot of people now that through again not like a I'll say like a genetic case of autism, more of like a socially induced form of autism where it's like you're terminally online all the time, so you're just weird. And like left to your own devices, you are weird and you make people uncomfortable, but you can like toggle it on and off, where it's like you can kind of turn it off and be normal for a little bit. And like, oh, he's normal. But then again, if you left alone, you'll be back to this kind of autistic behavior. So it's, I don't know, just the word I came up with is like this toggleable autism where it's like you turn it on and off, where like, you can kind of be normal, or act normal, even if you're like your quote unquote like regular state, not toggled off is socially, anxious or weird. So I don't know. I just think most people now, even like the healthy Zoomers now, like they all have this like toggleable form of autism where generally they exhibit antisocial behavior, but they have the good ones have the ability to turn it on and off. Whereas the ones that don't, the truly brain rotted amongst us, are not, and they can't turn it off and on. It's like all the time they're weird as fuck. Um, but you're kind of successful if you have like a toggleable amount of autism, or just like autistic traits. It's not like autism itself, but like antisocial traits, because the whole crux of autism as a disease is a social disorder where you're just not in tune socially. You can't measure the vibes, and you can't uh, you know adjust accordingly to vibes as things adjust. That's pretty much like the I guess the Zoomer speak of what actual autism is, medical or whatever. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. I guess the other topic I was thinking about earlier today was with regard to like luck. And I've said before a few episodes ago about like luck doesn't really have a direction per se. It's like if you're unlucky, you technically are then lucky, because luck as an abstraction, what luck is it's a statistically unlikely event. Now, luck would be generally means it's a good event, right? Something good happens. If you're lucky winning the lottery, right? That was a good event that was statistically unlikely to happen to you. Whereas, like, my argument is that I don't think you choose events, um, events that are statistically unlikely. You don't choose based off of their good or badness. You either get like something bad happening to you that's statistically unlikely, and something good happening to you they're both statistically unlikely events. Now, one is good and you like it, one is bad, but they're both like lucky or unlucky. It's the same. Like you're still dealing with unlikely events statistically, and that's really all it is. So either like you're living, maybe you're just someone that statistically unlikely events happen to. You're then like you're not a lucky person. You're both a lucky and an unlucky person. So like luck doesn't really have a specific direction. Now you just call things that are good, lucky, and things that are bad, unlucky. But when you boil it down, it's the same thing. It's a statistically unlikely event happening to you. So it's not like, again, you can call that lucky, but if you are lucky, you are also unlucky. So if you consider yourself an unlucky person, let's say you have like, I don't know, you got a just unlucky draw with like family and stuff like that. You technically are then like also still a lucky person. So it's like, I don't know, I would argue that like, and again, statistically, this is kind of a fallacy, in the sense that like if you have, I don't know, say you come from a broken family and you got unlucky like on the family side, or the unlucky with the genetic side, maybe you get lucky career wise or with a significant other of some kind. So I guess one way to think about that is like, all right, well, if you're assuming everything kind of nets out even, maybe take more risks knowing that you've already gotten unlucky with a few other things. What do you have that you have kind of less to lose already anyway? So it's like, I don't know, if you come from a broken family and you, are unlucky, maybe you got like a, disease of some kind that you have to deal with that, is just kind of bad luck. Then I think it might be, at least, one way of living might be like, all right, well, since I got, I'll say unlucky in that regard, there's luck to be had, I suppose. Meaning that, a statistically unlikely event happened to me already, you know, uh, and I realize the likelihood of another one happening is the same regardless. But you might as well, I guess, I don't know, live boldly and see if that, and see if you get, lucky in the other direction or unlucky in the other direction, which would be lucky. I don't know. It's kind of weird. The statistics kind of ruins that. That was meant to be more of a, I don't know, a more, I guess, spiritual argument, but I guess with incorporating statistics, it actually loses a lot of its gusto. I guess this is similar to this. I was reading this book that I just finished called Solitary Confinement. It's by a British spy that was captured in France by the Gestapo. So he was sent, as the title would suggest, into solitary confinement, in which he was, there for like 526 days. So a long time. And the book is kind of a lot of his philosophical musings. And it's interesting only because he comes to a lot of the same conclusions that, not the same conclusions, but similar abstractions that a lot of wise philosophers have, in yesteryear. But he came to those conclusions simply, locked in a prison cell, starving to death, which is, just another an interesting, exercise in, I guess human psychology. But one quote that was interesting to me that I read in there was, and this is not verbatim, so this is just kind of a, summarization of the quote, was that knowledge and reason had failed to serve me. Hope instead gave me an answer. So it's kind of where thinking through things logically, right? If you always kind of adhere to this, very strict frame of things have to be logical and they have to make sense in order for them to do them. It's I've argued this before about science being suicidal, which is my joking way of saying it. Like I don't at a certain point, this like hell bent, on reason and things being like logical and perfect and all this like structure eventually kind of falls apart because I think we realize it partially could just be due to complexity because the world is such a complex place. At some point either we're not able to keep up with I guess advanced and forms of logic, I suppose to put it that one way, or just like the number of variables get ultimately too complex. So like we're not able to logically reason ourselves through, essentially a rainfall of different events. It's kind of impossible logically to put everything together. At some point you kind of need something beyond this, and this where it is where kind of hope comes in. And the reason that many logicians have a problem with this is because it's inherently, antithetical to their whole, modus operandi of logic, right? It's like them even, being, it's, being a supporter of logic sounds very logical, right? But I think that the paradox being that, again, at some point logic doesn't help you, right? Because there are many things that don't adhere to our logic. And just viewing our logic as a tool, I think, is a healthier way than viewing it as like a god. I think people kind of venerate, logic to the extreme where they don't. Everything has to be logical, and it's like, well, why did my mom die in a car accident? It's like, well, logic. It's like, there's no logic to that. There's a certain amount of just like, and it's not saying you have to hope, that like bad things don't happen to you. I don't really view that as necessarily healthy either. But there is a certain amount of illogical, you know, I guess, amount of spirituality that comes in, and then you have to live with a sense of ambiguity that goes beyond logic. You can't live by logic, through and through, because eventually it's a very depressing and demoralizing existence. You kind of need, hope to have something to look forward to, right? Because logically, if you're always taking logical accounts of your financial situation and things are dire, and you never have any time to aspire to hope for anything beyond what you currently have, you're always going to be stuck in that situation. At some point, you have to have an illogical hope or aspiration for the future. And I think maybe you could argue that there are aspirations, that are quote unquote still logical, but I would kind of push back on that because pure logic doesn't aspire, right? No amount of mathematics is wishful, right? It's all very concrete. So inherently, in order to be a hopeful or a person that aspires for anything, you have to at least on some level abandon logic, and have some kind of aspiration or hope that something different. And that doesn't mean you have to be put your faith in God or Buddha or whoever the fuck is this, but it has to be, you have to put logic aside to have an aspiration of some kind. And I realize that maybe goes contrary to like the whole crux of a hypothesis. But the other way of looking at a hypothesis is just simply like, a hope that we want to validate, that we're trying to find logic to back up. But I think if you go through your entire life having to put forth hypotheses and then test them, rigorously using the scientific method, that's not a very efficient way to live because, you simply don't have the resources and time. No one has the resources and time to test everything. It's like almost like with, I don't know, like with the, taking vitamins or something. It's like every single vitamin you take, you have to like do your own double blind experiment to ensure that like it actually is going to do what you think it does. Where, I think the more practical way of looking at it is like, all right, I know the placebo effect is very powerful and real. So like, I'm just going to believe that these vitamins are going to help me, and they will because of the placebo effect, which is a verifiable, logical thing. And that people don't like that because it's like, well, but that's not. Is it a real effect? It's like, well, it is real, but it's real because I think it is. But that's not, again, logically, that doesn't really make that much sense because you're just kind of wishing something into existence. But scientifically, we've measured that, so it's like that is kind of real, and that kind of does paint a picture that aspirations and hopes can be real and they can fruition themselves, even if it does like anger scientists that like you can delude your way into thinking like a sugar pill does something, but it might. If you believe it, then it does work. But I think people that I guess are hell bent on logic don't appreciate that specific line of logic because it's not very satisfying. But it's no less logical in my opinion. But anyway, I don't know. It was interesting just thinking about uh, this person who'd obviously Christopher Burney, the author, who'd obviously had an appreciation for scientific thought. I think he was, he's raised Christian, but I guess saw differently than the church, and ruminated on the Bible a lot, and was talking about all the contradictions and things. But he realized that in terms of actually his situation, it didn't really help that he was being overly rational and logical, and at some point he had to recognize that it was hope that was what gave him an answer, even if it wasn't satisfying his logical brain or that part of his soul. It was still something that he again, logic and reason had failed to serve me. And what's the point really of any mode of thinking, whether it is hope or logical, that doesn't serve I guess the benefit of its user, right? Um, even with like, you could, I guess, liken this to machines in some way, where it's like, what's the point of it if it's not aiding humanity in some way? I guess there's a, there is kind of a reverence for logic itself or for technology itself. But I think the whole point of technology and logic should be to kind of aid in the flourishment of humanity. Whereas I think some maybe more pure philosophers would say, well, you know, uh, truth is above all else. Like, is it really a truth if it doesn't? The whole point of truth is it's supposed to knowledge of the truth is supposed to help humanity, and if it doesn't, then is it really helpful to have this truth? Um, and same with technology is like is the whole point of a technology is to aid in humanity's benefit. In my, again, anthropomorphic opinion, it's not to venerate technology itself. And if a technology fails to do its purpose, which is to aid humanity, then it's no longer a useful technology. It's pointless, even if it is new or better than something else. The purpose of it is to aid in humanity's endeavors, and if it doesn't do that, then it's no longer, by definition, it's no really longer really a technology. It's kind of a novelty at that point. And a similar line of reasoning, ironically, could be applied to logic itself. It's like if logic is no longer helpful to a human, or every time a new mathematical theory was created, a human got their head blown off. It's like, well, how useful would then it be to craft, these new theories? It's like, well, if we're just killing people by doing this, it's not, how helpful is that? And again, there's not, I think that does kind of run contrary to these people that value, logical conclusions purely on the sense that they are logical and they are conclusions. But I don't think that, I think they fail to realize the point of that. They lose the practicality behind coming to these conclusions is supposed to help us, right? Isn't that the whole point? All right. It's kind of a means for its own end, right? Even like people that, I want to go to Mars. Sorry. All right. Well, what's the point of going to Mars? It's like, well, we could. And it's like, well, yeah, but I think the point was supposed to be that like we have another, more space to grow and whatever. But I think people realize that like, A, that's like very impractical. B, it's, inaccessible. And we have our own planet here that we're already fucking up. But like, I think people now want to go to Mars because it's like we could, and it would be cool, right? Not necessarily that it would benefit humanity at all. And there's obviously, that's much more of a loaded topic than something else. But I think, I guess boiling it down to reason, the point of logical thinking is to help humans, and the point of technology is to help humans. And the moment those don't, they no longer become, I would say it no longer becomes a technology, and the logic again at some point fails to help us, um, which is reasonable. But it's interesting that he came to that conclusion. Let's see here. Let me pause. 1 second. All right, it's getting a little lightheaded. Anyway, I'm good now. So just switching topics, I suppose, is something different. I think my generation or just people a bit younger have, I guess, a different relationship with. In this case, I'm just referring to it as machines, but this could really be any kind of new technologies. But specifically, like even, I guess, really that is kind of a decent generalization. Just machines or new technologies and things. I think older generations, who have maybe a more cultural and social stability, view it. They're like, wow, that's so cool. Like, look at all these amazing things that like technology can do. Where it's now like, it's not that I'm not impressed by certain things, but I don't really view it as like, thanks for improving my everyday life. The first thing I see when a new technology or something comes out, it's like, oh fuck, what great thing is it going to now pull away from me and ruin? It's like, whereas I don't know, people. I guess the first people to watch porn were like, "Wow, this is amazing, great." We can, where it's like now, it's like, "Oh, great," there goes like normal, there goes, now it's a whole new generation of gooners now instead of, I'm not like a happy seal when I see these new technologies. Every single time I see it, it's just like it's a sense of dread now. Where it's like, motherfucker, what's ruined, right? Is nothing sacred anymore, which I think older people don't really understand that kind of perverse relationship. Because again, in theory, it's like, well, think about this new like newfound freedom that we have that I no longer even have to, maybe something like a dishwasher. Where it's like I don't have to wash dishes anymore. Where it's like, oh great, well now I can't get paid to wash dishes. Where it's like, and people used to see these things as net benefits that would be democratized and given to everybody. Maybe not equally, but in some vague sense, it wasn't like everyone's going to get all of it and it was just going to be, it's going to be weaponized against us. But I now kind of almost assume that any new technology or development will not be democratized at all, and whatever will be used to be used as a weapon against me specifically. And me individually, not even specifically, but me individually, or all of us individually. So it's like, they're not like using it to, to benefit people in mass. It's, be used as a surveillance tool or in some way to like, make me pay an extra $10 for something stupid, or make me wait in some other line of, it's just I don't view these new developments with excitement and glee, just because maybe I'm just almost expecting, or I've seen time and time again, I've been conditioned that like, all right, great, this is going to be some new tool to fuck me over, and now it's another another layer of bloat, or another just one more abstraction that is going to kind of chip away at my well-being. Whereas I think older people have this like almost like this admonishment, or this like they love seeing this new technology and these new developments. But maybe because they have, again, my theory is that they have more a greater sense of social, economic, and like interpersonal security, that a younger generation doesn't really have. It's not like I'm not gonna. I know I can't be sure that I'm gonna go back to my, nice giant house in the cul-de-sac, and family and community support structure to love me. It's like none of that. All that's been kind of fucked around by these new technologies. I don't know that I'll have these like, stable rocks anymore that older people might, have that the benefit of, at least knowing that they'll be around. If there's dishwashers everywhere, or whatever the technology is that gets people excited. It's obviously not dishwashers anymore, and I'm glad we have dishwashers. I'm not saying I would love to do it, but if I could make the equivalent of 90 grand washing dishes, that wouldn't be that bad, right? But now it's like you have to either work for Evil Corp or something, or do something other horrible. I don't know. It's just I don't really. I think a lot of people my age don't have this like happy seal clapping when we see a new technology. It's like the first thing we think of is like, motherfucker, like there goes something else that was good before. It's like, even like, I don't know, something that I did enjoy, maybe like a bot that plays Pokemon. It's like, I don't even want to see that. I don't care. I want, the point of Pokemon wasn't to get a bot to play it. It was so that we could play it and we would enjoy it. It's like even better, like Minecraft that I'm playing right now. It's like, all right, fine. Could I program some stupid robot to like run around, and it's like, no, like sure, maybe I could, yes, technically I could do that, but would I want to see it? Like, again, after like maybe the novelty of it, the next thing I'd go is like, well, now it's stupid. Now it's kind of ruined it for me. It's like, it's the same with, I guess this goes to a story that I'll tell. It's a brief story, but pretty much there was this game that some of you might remember. I guess if you're an old timer, I suppose like me, but it's called. It's not even actually that old. It's like it's probably barely 10 or 15 years old. But it's called Fate, and it was like a dungeon crawler game. And I used to play on the family computer, and it was fun. It was like you'd collect swords and better armor, and you'd just get upgraded. You'd kill these beasts, and you go deeper and deeper in the dungeons. You go to dungeon level 100, sure, like in hindsight, maybe it's it's repetitive and whatever. But one day, my brother, uh, looked up like cheats on how to like give yourself auto items and like give yourself all the stuff in the world, and maybe that maybe in a different setting, different game, it wouldn't have ruined it, but it completely ruined the game for me. I never want to play anything ever because you're like one hotkey away from permanent cheats or like unlimited gold or something, and it just kind of ruins the fun of the game. Same with like I don't know having an AI, just like with a level 100 Charizard beat the shit out of everybody. It's not you kind of lose the fun. It's like like the fun was doing it myself and having agency over the game. Like I know it's cool that a technology can do this, but you're ruining the whole point of it for me. I don't now it's not fun anymore. So it's not like I don't view every technological advance as now just like the equivalent of a level 100 Charizard killing me. But it does kind of feel like that way sometimes. Like every new AI thing is just, or new development is just now great. Now you've ruined something else that at one point was good or was fun or I enjoyed or was something that somebody could have done somewhere for a little bit of money. But now it's automated and it's kind of the fun is out of it now and the human is sucked out of it and it's just another kind of empty, sterile production. And again, I think older people don't tend to be as cynical about these things. But I guess technology's taken away a lot from us, right? Whereas I think older people, technology gave a lot and it's kind of afforded many new things and afforded a lot of these luxuries. Whereas like any of the luxuries I've known that have had, and these luxuries may not have been physical in the sense it's like it's better food or it's not better food, it's worse food. But many of the luxuries, all it has done is kind of hold them away. So it's really soured, I think, a whole generation's view of technology. Because I'm not one to say that all technologies are bad. I think there's a lot of nuance to it. But I, as a technologist, I empathize deeply with people that technology's only taken from them because I understand that and I've seen understand that technology has taken a lot from an entire generation, socially, financially. I guess those are two pretty big pillars, right? Their whole social structure has been ruined by technology through social media, financially, like job security, and again, the whole social dynamics of making money and working. That's kind of been ruined a lot because the jobs now are so are just ripe for people that have all these antisocial and autistic qualities. So it's just taken a lot. And so I understand that, while these, boomers and Gen Xers might look at technology and be, oh, this is so great. Look how wonderful this is. And technology's given you a lot, but it's taken a lot away from people like, younger people. So it's no surprise that they, every new thing is like, fuck that. I don't want to do that. And which I think is a totally fair and healthy reaction to have to things, especially as it's, moving so blatantly in a direction that is not helping everybody, or at least not helping anybody in a way that is remotely democratic. Again, not that I'm some patron of democracy, but there certainly should be at least some democratic notion to the way that technologies develop and their enhancements improve everyone's lives, not just the lives of a few. In that way, I am, very much of a democratic disposition. But that is, I'd say, view that's almost less like democratic in some way. But I think the benefits of good technology should be distributed communistically or not at all. Really, I don't think a very Republican or authoritarian view of I guess technology is the right way to distribute things. Um, so I don't know. Not that I'm an anarchist either. Uh, but I certainly am not an oligarch and I'm not supportive of these bullshit tech companies. Anyway, we'll move on to something else. I guess also with a generational gap or just a propensity that I've noticed. I guess with younger generations too, I think aspiration has kind of is viewed as more negatively. Or the other way to put this is just that like trying to do anything like different or new or trying is gay. It's like someone who wants to do something. Like let's say I don't know, one of my friends wants to be a writer, in Hollywood, and he's gonna risk it all. He's gonna go out there to be an actor. It's like, dude, that's gay. Like, it's almost seen as like that, which I don't think is the right thing. I don't think it's healthy. I don't think it's good that people like, now look at somebody because there's a thousand reasons not to do anything. Every single career is now like existentially threatened, right? So it's like even like if you want to be a writer, it's like, well, the likelihood of that is like almost zero. It's like, yeah, everybody knows that. Everybody knows the likelihood of anything is next to nothing. But like, what else am I supposed to do? What else is he supposed to do? Not try? I think like now trying to do anything that is like everything is unlikely. There's not anything that's like a given anymore. Even like being a boring ass accountant is like, is seen as the same like ridiculous thing as like I want to be a professional hockey player. It's like that the likelihood of that happening is almost nothing. But it's like what are people supposed to do? Do fucking sit on their ass all day and do nothing? I think there's like it's we now kind of I don't know, we bash on people that try to do stuff that's unlikely because it's unlikely. It's like, well, everything's fucking unlikely. I don't care if it is. I don't know. I feel like that's kind of the overarching sentiment now that like trying of any kind and like attempting to do something that is not like completely guaranteed, which by the way nothing is like in some way like a stupid thing to do because it's like, unlikely. It's like everything is fucking that way. So like every single career is like, is risky in some sense. It's like what you're now splitting hairs between like one career over the other just because it's like, well, why would you make it as an actor of some kind? Or, do you know how many, there's very, very few writing jobs. There's very few of any kind of job left. So I don't want to fucking hear it. It's like, what do you want people to do? Is just, sit there and complain about everything all the time? It's like, no, at least let them fucking try. Don't, there's no point in shitting on somebody for wanting to do something that's, that is in kind of a moonshot because I don't know the way a lot of people see it and the way I kind of see it is most everything's a fucking moonshot. So what else what do you have to lose anyway? It's like what fine. He tries to be an actor and he fails. So then what? He's back to where he was before anyway. Now just I can at least say he tried. But I don't see the naysaying as being a good thing where people are like, well, that's the likelihood of that happening. It's just not going to happen. You'll just be disappointed. It's like, well, fine. At least let them be disappointed having done something versus just being disappointed they didn't even do anything in the first place. Or they fought. I listened to the statistics. That's not helpful. Anything, like, most any of these studies that just are whatever are proving how unlikely. It's like I don't give a fuck about that. I don't give a shit about the odds. I don't care. I'm done. I don't need all this data to like make sure it's this perfect decision. Fuck that. I'm just at some point there's an intuition that kind of trumps all this bullshit. And you just say, well, I fucking thought, and I was going to do that, and I'm going to try, and it didn't work. Fine. I don't care. I know it was, unlikely from the outset. There's no point in me, weighing every fucking option I have. Well, statistically, like, if I'm going to get struck by lightning, it'll happen at 3 p.m., so I shouldn't go outside. It's like, that's fucking stupid. Everyone knows that's stupid. Let the person try. What do they have to lose? I don't know. I just feel like now at this generation, I feel like a lot of people, anytime anyone's like, oh, I want to do something that, might be a little bit like on like, oh, that's like, it's kind of a long shot. I want to make my own movie. If someone told me that, again, the, logical thing would be like, well, you know how unlikely it is? Like, how much funding is dried up for these movies? Like, that's really tough. You got to have 5 years experience. Like, no, why the fuck would I run around and show this person's, fine, I would support them, and not a sense you want to support people that are doing things that are impractical. There's I don't know, there is some level of social nuance to be like, well, all right, well, you want to be an astronaut, but like, you're 800 pounds. It's like, all right, well, maybe I would advise you, start with a gym membership or something. But like, if someone who's wants to try something that maybe he's funny, he wants to be a comedian. Why the fuck would you shit on their dream? What's the point in that? Just because it's unlikely? I think most careers now are existentially threatened. So there's not really any argument you could have for even like safe careers, right? Even being an accountant or a venture capitalist or whatever the fuck people want to do. There's all you can point to any numbers that would say that well this is an unlikely event. Like it's good luck with that. Fine. That's kind of describes everything now. So I don't know that it's wise to be running around shitting on people for doing stuff. I don't know. I just feel like amongst our generation there's a lot of if you try at something, you're gay, or it's like a loser thing to like try and fail at something. Like you can't fail. Where it's like, I don't know, fail whatever you want. The whole point of life is to just try to do something and to fuck it up and it didn't work. And then you learn something. Great. Like, why is that such a bad thing? Right? Well, why is failing at something the worst thing that could happen? It's like, well, I got to told you would have failed. Fine. At least I did. At least I failed. Like, what's the point in like not ever trying and just thinking that I would fail and then failing because I didn't do it, because I didn't try. It's like, well, no, I'd rather just try and then fail and then be like, okay, well, that was kind of what I expected to happen anyway. But at least, I validated that. It's even scientific in some way. I validated the fact that I thought I would fail and I did. So then, no, fine. Now I'm back where I started, having at least done something, right? I feel like it's just, it lends itself to inaction if it's all about like trying to mitigate failure of any kind. And um, I think part of the reason that we've, I don't know, harped on failure so much is that we celebrate success so much that we now look at failure as something bad, right? Where I think maybe the better way of doing that would be to not celebrate success so much as like this, like everything is about being successful. Everything should be about trying, right? And success and failure can happen because they're bound to happen, but it shouldn't just all be about being successful, right? It should be all about putting effort in and trying. And if you fail, then great. That doesn't matter. It should be more about the effort than just about succeeding. I think maybe that's my whole thesis with this whole rant was really that just it should be more about effort than about having succeeded. Or if you failed, who cares? Whatever. You fail anyway. Everyone dies at the end. That's a failure. The ultimate failure is just dying, which that happens to everybody. So at some point you fail because you're dead. Boom. There. Then what's the point of failing to be a hockey player or something? At least let them fucking try out. What's the harm? Anyway, you're all failures because you're all gonna die. Anyway, peace out. Later.